Okay, streaming live. Good evening, everyone. This is the April 27th, 2022 Planning Board meeting for the Village of Mamaroneck. Hope everyone's well. And we have 3 applications on the agenda tonight, but before we get to them, we have a little bit of housekeeping to do. First, we'll take attendance. The members of the Planning Board who are here: Cindy Goldstein, Ellen Styler, and Richard Littman, and myself. Seamus O'Rourke is excused tonight. We have Frank Tavolacci, our building inspector, Teresa Backner, our land use attorney, Ashley Lai is here from AKRF, and Alicia Moore is here from AKRF, and Kevin Byrne is here tonight from Kellard Sessions, and Susan Oakley from Permeable Landscaping. And of course, we couldn't do this without her. Brittany O'Neill, the Land Use Board Secretary, are all here tonight to assist us and to work. Okay. First on the agenda, we have minutes from our last meeting, April 13th. Does anybody have any comments or changes or anything about this? I have nothing.
I had one thing at the bottom of page 2, the last paragraph that starts Chair Savold. So it goes from talking about Chair Savold to the next sentence is, I don't know if there's another way to get into the property. I think we just need to match up the grammar there. And she stated she didn't know if there, I don't know, something other
Did I
than
say that, or did the applicant say that?
you might have mused it. I'm not sure.
Right. Okay.
Or just delete the sentence. I don't think it's really important to what the proceedings were.
Yeah, why don't we just delete that sentence?
Okay.
Okay, so that sentence comes out and it just goes from sentence that begins Chair Savold to then Ms. Waffa, the applicant's engineer, I think. Okay, anything else? Okay, can I have a motion then to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Ellen?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay, that's done. Okay, this brings us to the first application of the evening, which is the application we were just talking about in the minutes, 1037 Oaks Lane. Okay, when we last left 2 weeks ago, we were musing, as Ms. Goldstein said, about whether we could have another entrance to the rear of the property for construction vehicles so that they would try to avoid the 2 mature trees on the left side of the property. We have someone from the applicant
I'm promoting them.
promote. We received a revised layout where I can explain it.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Angela from Dan Sherman's office.
Hi, why don't you bring us up to date?
Sure. So from the previous meeting, we kind of went back to the property and took a look to see if we could access the rear yard in a different way. And I know we had spoken about possibly going on the right side of the house. After going to the property and reviewing all the existing shrubbery and mature trees on that side, it wasn't really going to be a possibility. But we did take a look at the willow tree that was in question, and we took measurements of the drip line and everything like that. And that was all put on our new plan. And we basically concluded that we have a little bit over 25 feet in between the drip line and the willow and the house to access the road. So we moved the access road a little bit closer to the house. And now we should have plenty of room to do proper tree protection and not damage any of the roots of that willow.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody from the planning board or anyone, the consultant, have any comment with regards to that? I know, Susan, you reviewed it also and sent us a memo with regards to that you also change your plans to note the proper pre-protection and the detail including on all the plans.
Yes.
So anybody have any questions of Ms. Lawler? No? Susan, any comment that would you like to make?
I just have one comment that, they did follow the tree protection standard, which calls for tree protection below the drip line. But as you can see from the photos, the tree leans heavily towards the street rather than towards where the construction entrance will be. So, that is our tree protection standard that aligns the protection by the drip lines. So they are following that based on their assessment that there is room there. But, if they can do anything like put planking down to protect what tree roots probably are under there, that would be the best way to protect the tree.
And Susan, what are the chances that the Japanese cutleaf maple will survive transplant? And
I might, instead of taking it and balling and burlapping it and putting it to the side, I might what they call heel it in, which means to mound some dirt around the balled and burlapped root ball of the tree. That would ensure that it stays moist and constant watering. It will just evaporate more because the root system is going to be more exposed.
okay, so I'm sure the applicant will take every precaution because those are very valuable.
Absolutely.
trees.
Yeah, we don't want to lose that tree, so.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think that was the only open issue. There were a couple of small things that our consulting engineer pointed out in the last, in their last memo that we've addressed in our draft resolution. Does anybody else have anything? If not, we can move on to the resolution for this matter. No? Okay, we received a draft resolution just yesterday, I guess, from our land use attorney, from Teresa. Other than one small typo that I found, Teresa. Two, that has the big draft letters written on it. The memo that Susan wrote, the very last line of it was dated the 26th. That's just a typo, not the 28th, which is wrong.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
While we're on minor typos, the first whereas clause, it talks about the owners, whereas I think we've only referred to one owner.
Yep, I got that.
Right.
Okay.
I didn't get that. Okay. All right. Anybody else have any comments or questions about this? It does require the applicant to submit revised reports and plans to the building inspector and to the consulting engineer with the two minor comments that they made in their last memorandum.
Not a problem.
And then do I have a motion to approve the resolution as amended?
So
So,
moved.
Richard, can I have a second?
Second,
Okay, let's vote. Cindy,
yes.
Ellen,
Yes.
Richard,
yes,
and I vote yes. Okay, you're done.
Very good. Thank you, guys. Have a great night.
Okay, have a good evening. Okay. This brings us to the next item on the agenda, which is an application for a new motor vehicle sales facility at 1258 East Boston Post Road. The applicant had been before the planning board. Actually, this application first came before us a little over a year ago. And then it came to us in September, and they've been busy elsewhere ever since. So let's catch up with the application at 1258 Post Road and see what they've been up to and what's happened. Notice that the layout of the design has changed. Mr. Napier, how do you pronounce your last name? Napier?
Napier. Yes.
Napier. I got it. Okay, good. Are you speaking for the applicant tonight?
I will. Joining us should also be Rex Gedney and then Brittany. Do you see Alan Pilch in
Yep, I
there as
already
well?
promoted him.
Okay. So that's the project.
All right. Where you all been? What you been doing?
We were with the zoning board for quite some time, but we did finally receive a special permit approval. And so that triggered our return to the board here. We did have a chance, so that the overall project still remains roughly the same. It's a new motor vehicle dealership with a proposed structure. Now in the plan package, you have an elevation of the building. As noted by the chair, the parking layout, proposed parking layout was altered slightly during our time with the zoning board. Their main concern was not with so much the vehicle storage spaces, but the actual customer parking. It was noted while we were before the zoning board that there's a code requirement for 10 parking spaces. I believe our initial plan was showing a retail compliant layout as opposed to motor vehicle dealership. So we've made that correction. Outside of that, the plan is roughly still the same. The only other item of note with the zoning board was that the plan now has our proposed lighting fixtures. And I believe there was a detail that was also submitted in this latest plan set. Just to familiarize the board, the concept is to try to match the lighting at the main Toyota dealership across the street. So there'll be LED low voltage fixtures, downward facing, shielded, etc. We're happy to walk through that with you. I did see the two Terravella memo as well as the colored memo, and so I can just jump to those quickly. With respect to the street tree noted on the Terravella memo, I think it may just not be of a size that was picked up by our surveyor, but certainly there's no intent to remove that tree, so we'll have that added to the plan and show protection details. That wasn't an attempt to say that we're taking it down. On the Kellard Sessions memo, I believe most of the preliminary comments were addressed. I do know comment number 18 concerning the DOT highway work permit. We did include a submission of our highway work permit application to the DOT. That is still in stage 1 and under review by the DOT. We wouldn't anticipate having any preliminary feedback from them until roughly late May. With respect to the curb cut, I know John had mentioned that the board should discuss the Sunnyside curb cut, whether that should be closed. Our intent is to effectively have it closed and not have it as an active curb cut. But as the applicant is the lessee of the property, not the property owner, we're just not in a position to offer to close that curb cut without going to the property owner and making that request. We also, in theory, would like it to be open just in case there's some issue. It's an alternative means of egress off the property, but there is no intent to use that as an active driveway for loading and unloading cars. There were a few other minor technical details with respect to asphalt and sub-base specifications, which we'll certainly pick up on the next round of plans for you. There was a note about what we're doing with the existing. There's two utility poles currently on the property that have some floodlights up on them. The intent is we're not going to be using those lighting fixtures, so those lighting fixtures would be removed. The poles would remain only because they have power lines running to them. One goes onto the neighboring property, so there wouldn't be any intent to remove the poles. They're not in the way of our operation of the site, but the lighting certainly could come down. And we'll note that on the next round of plan submissions. The parking layout, we had a preliminary meeting between myself, Alan, and Rex earlier today, and that one probably requires a little discussion with the board. As noted earlier, the zoning board was mainly concerned about getting a functional layout for the 10 required customer parking spaces, and I can pull up my screen here, which would probably be helpful. Is that plan showing for all of you?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So the 10 parking spaces or 10 customer parking spaces are these 5 spaces here and these 5 spaces here. there was a note in the Kellard memo that the vehicle storage spaces, as well as half of the customer parking spaces, are shown at 8 feet rather than a minimum of 8.5. So we can certainly work on that design to expand those to have a minimum of 8.5 and to show some turning diagrams. It may require some reconfiguration or loss of the vehicle storage spaces. We may need to get rid of a space or two here, or expanding these outwards may pinch some of these other things. But I guess the question for the board is on the vehicle storage spaces, is that same requirement that they be a minimum of 8.5 apply, or is the board comfortable with the non-customer parking being at an 8-foot width?
I'm not sure the planning board, that fits in the zoning code. That's not something the planning board, Teresa, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think it's within our purview to reduce the size of the parking spaces.
Now, Leo, did you ask the ZBA about that when you were in front of them?
It was not flagged at the ZBA level, so we weren't aware of this issue until the Keller memo was turned out.
Okay.
Did the ZBA consider those parking spaces, or did they consider them vehicle storage spaces?
Vehicle storage spaces, so that the
Oh,
labeling of the customer parking was done at the ZBA level. That was really their main concern. There was a different configuration before that had a bigger embankment of parking up here and was just showing customer parking in this area here. At the ZBA, they noted that the amount of customer parking spaces we were showing was non-compliant, which triggered this redesign. I think they have no, I don't want to speak for them, but I don't think they have any concern as to whether or not I have 20, 30, 40, or 10 vehicle storage spaces.
so the vehicle storage spaces are not going to meet the minimum parking requirements of the site plan, correct?
Under this current configuration, that is correct, based on John's comment here, I suppose.
Okay,
Well-
so
Sorry, Ashley, go ahead.
I was just saying, in terms of the reasons why you have a wider parking space, is because you have people coming and going and opening their doors. So for a vehicle storage space where their cars are being stored and only being moved by employees of Toyota, presumably, I'm not sure it would have to meet the requirements of a parking space because it's storage.
Understood. So this may just be a nuance as to how we're labeling it. It's not considered parking per se.
But I don't know if Teresa had anything.
Well,
She may disagree.
my thought was, from what Mr. Napier is saying, this layout was specifically requested by the ZBA and specifically approved by them. So I think from that, one could draw the conclusion that they did not consider them parking spaces, but vehicle storage spaces. So if that's the case, they're the ones who get to interpret the code, right? And if that can be read into their determination, then I don't think it's a problem, because Ashley's right. Nobody's moving those cars, but the people who work at the facility, basically.
But so
Okay.
I'm confused, I guess, and if this can be explained to me, I completely understand the vehicle storage and why an 8-foot width would be acceptable for that, because the cars are not being moved that often. They're being moved by staff on the premises. I thought we were talking about the 10 customer parking spaces that are delineated there as customer spaces, which are also, though, 8 feet when they need to be 8.5.
So we will adjust that, Cindy. That was, so the spaces down here are 9 feet in width. The spaces up here are shown at 8 feet in width. We will make that adjustment. We will show some turning diagrams. With that adjustment, I may wind up losing some of the storage spaces, that just depending on how that all plays out. In order to make the turning maneuvers, I may lose a space or two over here as well. So we'll come back to you with a compliant plan that shows the customer parking complying with the village code.
Okay, and where are the employees parking?
So they would either park on site or they would park off site at one of the adjacent facilities and come over here. There's going to be more than enough space on site here. The code doesn't actually distinguish between customer parking and employee parking. It just specifically says for a motor vehicle dealership, you're required to have 10 spaces.
Okay, I just, parking is at a premium, I think, everywhere in the village and, along the post road, and then it blocks, I just, was wondering what you were envisioning for the employees. And I mean, how many employees are we talking about at this site on on any given day?
So there would be a minimum of at least 2 in the showroom. And then, depending on what's happening and which site is busy, there may be other guys jockeying cars back and forth.
Okay, so not that many. I understand that. The other thing I'd be interested to know is turning radius for emergency vehicles. I mean, if you have a car fire at one of the cars at the back of the property, I would think you would need to have enough space to get a fire truck, close enough to address the issue.
I mean, I would think the site's not that big that there would be access on Sunnyside if you needed to get back into this corner, or otherwise a vehicle would be able to, but we can look at that with Alan and Rex.
Yeah, I think it's just worth looking at. Hopefully it won't be a problem.
I was just going to ask a question. I forgot what it was.
Well, I have a couple of others if I'll.
Keep going.
Okay.
Maybe it'll come to me.
What are you envisioning as the hours of operation for this site?
Oh, I remember my question.
They would mirror the hours across the street. And so if you give me a second, I can probably pull that up.
That's nothing that's specified in the special permit from ZBA. Is it?
It was not specified in the special permit from the ZBA. That is correct.
Okay. And it
And
seems
it's-
like you're doing a good job, keeping the lights away from the neighbors.
Yes, and it would be typical car dealership hours, so it's not going to be, running a business here 10 o'clock at night or anything like that.
Well, it's weekends. It could be evenings, right?
Yes, into the early evening.
And I understand the issue with the Sunnyside curb cut, but would you be willing to put a chain up so that it wasn't, if that was a condition of the site plan?
Yes, so there currently is a chain up, and the intent would be to just leave that as is. And then in addition, you can see that we don't have our asphalt extending all the way out to it, so that there's no intent this will be grassed and landscaped in this area, so it's not intended to be an active curb cut.
Okay. And maybe this question is more for our consultants. I don't remember. I think we talked about this when you were here with us a long, long time ago. Because there are going to be parked cars here that may not be moved on a regular basis, is there anything special to deal with the oil or gas or fluid that drips out of these, just as the normal course of cars do discharge fluids that are, not desirable to be sitting on the ground? Is there anything, is there a cleaning method? Is there a separator? You just wait for the rain to wash it away? What happens with car discharge?
That question, I would defer to Alan, and then I don't know if Alan would have an immediate response for you, but Alan, if you could chime in.
Hi, Alan Pilch, the engineer on the project. There is actually a hydrodynamic separator that's being proposed in the stormwater plan. It's on sheet C 102. And that does pick up runoff from the entire parking area. That's it. You see the hydrodynamic separator, Storm Scepter STC model 900 there. It does take the runoff from, all the parking areas there, which will drain into either catch basin number 1 or trench drain number 1, and are conveyed to the hydrodynamic separator. And those devices are very good at removing both sediment as well as floatables like oils or grease or something like that. So there is a place that it is trapped prior to being conveyed into the subsurface chambers.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I remember my question. Maybe you can explain the ZBA, we have a copy of their resolution. They seem to really talk about limiting, this car dealership shall be capable of operating independently from the other Toyota City operations across the street and next door, actually, and sell only used vehicles that are traded in on that site, actually. I was just wondering why they were so concerned about it operating independently.
So again, I don't want to speak for the ZBA, but I could just give my take on what transpired while we were before them. There was, as the board is aware, Toyota City operates a site across the street as well as another site across Sunnyside Avenue. And there was a request and kind of an internal debate back and forth between the ZBA chair as well as members of the ZBA as to whether or not this should be considered as kind of a, all three sites should be brought under one special permit and considered as a whole. And for a variety of reasons, we did not wish to pursue that approach, mainly because the two other sites already have their own individual special permits. And so to then have a master special permit, they also are not, while they're under common control now, they may not always be in the future. And so there was a concern on our end where if we had one site plan approval and one special permit and we lost the lease for this site, perhaps, will we then have to return to the board to seek modifications of approvals on the other two properties because now we're no longer in control of this site. And so along that line of reasoning, the ZBA was very specific to say, well, if we're going to consider this as a standalone property, then it needs to be able to operate as a standalone property. As the board can see, and this was some of the discussion with the zoning board, there is a building that will be on site. There is a showroom that will be on site. There's a capability to have staff on site. There's the ability to have customer parking and kind of check all the boxes to operate as a standalone motor vehicle dealership. If at some point in time this gets spun off from the Toyota City family and turns into a Nissan or a Honda dealership or whatever it may be.
That makes sense. I just was concerned it had something to do with the operations itself as opposed to, it sounds like it's more related to the permit.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. All right. Anybody else have any questions?
I'm sorry, I have one more. And maybe this is for our counsel, Teresa. Looking at the ZBA resolution on page 3 at the top, it's item 4 under be it further resolved. The dealership shall not contain less than the number of parking spaces reflected on the final site plans, and that the final lighting plan is no less intrusive than the lighting plan included on the final site plan. It's not supposed to be no less intrusive, is it? It would be no more intrusive.
Yeah, it would be more. That's obviously just an error.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because I think that would be a tough standard to hit to make it more intrusive.
Yeah, I'm sure that was just something they didn't catch.
Okay,
And it did say no less parking spaces. So Mr. Napier, that would be the customer parking spaces, correct?
Correct.
Okay, just that word probably should have been in there too, but
okay.
just to make it clear.
Again, I don't want to speak for them, but I don't know why they would care how many, as long as I'm not actually increasing the amount of parking or vehicle storage spaces, I don't know why they would care if I had less.
I can't think of any reason why they would. Yeah.
But you never know. Okay. All right. Okay, so you're gonna look at the parking to make sure that they meet the required width. You're going to come back to us with some information about turning radius and things related to the customer's movement. And I know, is there anything else?
I'll get you specific hours of operation as well. And Cindy, I know you asked us to take a look at the emergency vehicle piece. I can talk to Alan and Rex about that.
Great, thank
I
you.
mean, it is a very small site. I mean, if a fire truck was out on Boston Post Road, they should be able to reach pretty much every place on the site, or Sunnyside if they have to be on that side. But AKRF, do you have Ashley? Do you have anything to add?
No, I have no further comments.
Okay. we've already talked about the comments from Keller Sessions, but Kevin, do you have anything that you would like to add to the
He
discussion?
is having some technical difficulties trying
Oh,
to
yes.
connect to audio. I'm actually going to promote him right now. He called in on his cell phone, so hold on one moment. Just see if
Oh,
he has
okay.
anything. I think that should work. Kevin, you can try it now.
He has to unmute himself.
Hi, sorry, can everyone hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, geez, I apologize. I can see and hear everything going on, but I cannot participate. But I'm on my cell phone now, but I think it works. Just based off what was discussed, yeah, of the where the employees parked, I think was something John and I had gone through earlier today. The turning radius, it's definitely tight coming around the building. Something we would definitely need to take a look at. I'm sorry, I just want to go back with the curb cut. Was the intent to leave the curb cut?
That is the intent, Kevin. It'll be closed from regular vehicle access, but not removed.
Okay, because you have your storage vehicles packed up pretty much up to that spot.
Correct. And I don't know if you missed my comment to the board, but there's the asphalt doesn't continue out to the curb cut, so it'll actually be grassed over in that area. It's just we don't own the site, and so without getting permission from the neighbor to just willingly close up the curb cut, there is a neighboring property that's not part of this project, but that at one point in time that curb cut serviced, and in the interest of preserving the owner's options for the future, we were not looking to abandon the curb cut.
But it will be grassed over upon completion?
Correct, and chained off.
Okay, okay. Yeah, we thought at least putting some landscaping or grass in there should, make the road sidewalk continuous over there.
Okay. Susan, I know Mr. Napier referenced your memo with regard to the street tree. Do you have anything else that you'd like to bring to the board's attention?
No, it was pretty clear that it should just be on the plan and protected.
Okay, so that's everything. Anybody else have anything else? I think we've just summarized what we would expect back from you the next time we see you, and
We'll get working on it.
okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And this brings us to the final item on tonight's agenda. I don't know, Mr. Napier, you're just gonna hang around, right?
I'll stay on, yes.
Okay. 10. Okay, we've been working on this for a while, and I think the newest thing that we have to discuss is the updated landscape plan. So, Mr. Napier, do you have somebody else that you want to have promoted to go through?
Promoting Diane. Who else would you like promoted? They have to raise their hand, just so I know.
Okay.
Christina and Meredith. And Madam Chair, I know this was on the agenda tonight for a public hearing, so I'm happy to do an introduction of the project, or however you'd like me to proceed.
I think maybe just briefly, I think most of the attention tonight is going to be on the landscape plan. There weren't many other issues with regards to this application. But yeah, why don't you all run through the project of, I haven't looked, we have some people here probably waiting to speak. We'll focus on the landscape plan when you get to that point.
Sure. So just briefly for those in the public that are here for this project, the project is the construction of a new zoning compliant 2-story residence, pool and cabana at the subject property. The application has been pending before the board for several months and has gone through some significant revisions with respect to stormwater management and landscaping during those meetings with the board. Most notably, the stormwater management design was significantly increased from the original proposal, and there are now, I believe it's 117 Coltech units that are proposed, so it's a very significant stormwater detention system. In addition, the amount of proposed trees on site has also been significantly increased in response to the village landscape consultants and the board's comments, and there are now a total of 78 trees of 13 different native species to be replanted, which does not include, over 100 arborvitae, holly, or rhododendron that are being used for perimeter screening. 2 of those trees are street trees, which will be red oaks. And with that, that's my brief overview of the project. If you'd like to open up to questions or comments from the public.
We're not there yet, but.
Or from the board, sorry.
I would like to have the landscape person who did the final, can you pull up the landscape plan and walk us through how it is now? Just generally, we don't need the names of every tree and whatnot, but just show us, especially the street view. That question came up from a resident earlier today. Susan put together a quick little memo answering some of her concerns, but why don't you walk us through, if you can even enlarge the landscape plan on the screen so people can see it.
Meredith, would it be easier for you if I stop sharing, or do you want me to just keep this up?
No, I think you can keep this up. I think this works. Yeah. Okay, there was a lot in that, but in general, the way this plan ended up, through all of our revisions here, is that along the front, along Orienta, we are adding in the 2 street trees that Leo mentioned. So those are, again, red oaks. Those are on the Village of Mamaroneck's tree list. So that's how they were chosen. They fit in with the kind of surrounding additional, street trees that are up and down the road there. And then the way, at the end of the day, what this property is going to end up looking like overall planted is there's going to be a stone wall running along Orienta that's already existing and going to remain. And then directly behind that, there will be holly are directly behind that, and then running down the length of the property on either side is arborvitae as screening trees between. Sorry, what? Okay, on either side of the property line, going all the way down, there's arborvitae as screening trees on either side there, and then in between the front wall and the main part of the property, right, the house there, we've added in a number of trees. As Leo mentioned, there's the 78 in total trees that we had discussed in our last meeting, and we had discussed with Susan, after that. So those are all included in the front. There's a little bit of an opening in the planting that you can see. So where the Coltechs are in the front there, there is opening because we cannot plant trees in that area. So there'll be lawn coming down to the front there. And then in the back, we actually replaced the back row. What was the last time you saw it was all arborvitae along the back. We've replaced that with juniper, so eastern red cedar. As part of our kind of discussion with Susan, that was an acceptable replacement, native replacement for the arborvitae back there. And the planting kind of continues with tree planting along either side, kind of inset from all the arborvitae.
And the trees, when you say tree planting, they're flowering trees, they're diverse species.
Yeah, we have a combination actually. So Leo, if you go up to the planting schedule, there's a variety of trees here. So there's that top section is all your larger shade trees. So those are going to get the largest on site. And then the next category down is ornamental. That that category is sort of the next, level, the mid-level trees, if you will. Those are all flowering trees, all native to the area. And then the next category down is the evergreen trees, and those vary in size, but will be fully grown trees. And then there is one variety of evergreen shrub there, the rhododendron as well. So
All right, thank you.
you're welcome.
Okay. Ashley, AKRF, do you have anything to add to the discussion at this point?
No, I do not.
Okay. Kevin Sessions, I know John had one comment that he felt needed to be addressed. Do you want to just talk us through that?
Yes.
Oh, there you are.
You can see me now?
Yes.
I've heard and seen everybody this whole time now, finally on here. Yeah, just talking with John. I don't know if it's a major issue with the frontage there with the landscaping that you just were talking about. But maybe there's a possibility to revisit and look of breaking up the Coltex in the front lawn or staggering them in a way that you can allow for plantings to go on. Nothing will be crazy to push, but just something we can bring up. There was something John also mentioned to me about, I guess previously was talked about, there's a good amount of cut material, soil for this project. So if I don't know if it was determined that it'll be removed from the site, but if they choose to use it as spread it out as topsoil, all we would request would be an updated grading plan, just to make sure everything's correctly shown. If you're going to spread 6 inches, just add 6 inches to the grading so everything's correct.
So this is Christina with Langen Engineering. At the previous meeting, we went through our cut fill analysis and how we determined it. The site is basically balanced. The excess material results in like 4 inches of material spread over the site that we would use. It's going to be barely noticeable on a grading plan. There would be no import or export of material just based on the sheer size of the Coltex system and the foundations of the house and the pool and whatnot.
Okay, and you, I'm not too familiar with the job, but was there testing done in the front to
There was
the 3-foot separation?
There was testing that was done in the front. However, given that we've had to drop the system, Mr. Kellard had asked us to do additional testing to demonstrate the 3 feet of separation. We just talked with our client. We're going to schedule the additional testing in the front and the back to demonstrate that we have 3 feet between the bottom of our system and groundwater and rock. So we're going to confirm those hopefully within either this week or next week.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's the major thing for us, is make sure you have a separation there. And sorry, and just going through the notes, I have all the stormwater here is maintained on site through infiltration. There's no discharge off the rear yard or to any neighboring property.
Correct. The only discharge that would be from like the grassed areas, but the majority of everything is collected and contained on site and infiltrated through the 100-year storm event.
Okay.
Before when John told us he wasn't be able to make the meeting, he actually sent us a summary of his comments. And the last sentence of his comment about this was, "I believe they did a good job." So it's a couple of little odds and ends, but he gave you a nice compliment.
Thank you.
Okay, Susan. Now, before Susan speaks, Susan, our landscape architect or consultant, I just want to thank Susan for the amount of work that she did on this project. The analysis that she put together to determine the number of trees that were on the site. The applicant submitted an old survey from the 1960s, I believe, that had the trees indicated on them. Susan took that, she used Google Earth, she used all sorts of research with regards to the life of trees and how they would have grown since then, and came up with an amazing report to the planning board, which has now resulted in the landscape plan that you see in front of you. We were teasing all along the way now that she's an expert in what we called forensic landscaping or something, trying to figure out what had happened and how we could mitigate it. So I want to just thank Susan on behalf of the Village of Mamaroneck, the planning board, and hopefully the neighbors would like to thank her as well. Susan, by the way, is a resident of the Village of Mamaroneck, so she does this with neighborly love in her heart, I suppose. Susan, do you have anything you would like to add to anything that was said tonight with regards to the landscape plan?
The only thing is, I just want to clarify to who's ever watching that between the front Cultec system and the road, there's I believe it's a 4-foot wall and a row of Ilex opaca, American holly, and those mature to 15 to 30 feet tall. So even though there aren't any deciduous trees behind it, higher canopy trees behind the row of hollies, they will grow large enough to create a hedge that will block the house better from the street.
For everyone involved, I'm assuming.
Yes, yes.
For the residents of the home and greenery for the neighbors.
Yes, so I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, and as I mentioned before, we did receive an email from a neighbor with regards to trying to understand what the front would look like and how tall would those trees grow and how quickly and whatnot. We followed the tree law that was recently passed in the village with regards to size of tree and numbers of trees for each tree that was removed. And that analysis was posted on the website for a previous meeting. If you hadn't seen it, it's there to follow along where we came up with the number of 78 trees. And Susan did a nice chart with regards to the material and the size at planting, and then what their growth rate is. And again, as she points out in her memo to us, that it depends on the conditions of the soil and the conditions, climate conditions and whatnot. Trees all don't grow the same, basically. So I think that, though, this was very helpful for me to understand, because I planted a lot of trees in my property, and we always hear about caliper, and when we measure them for planning board purposes, we talk about diameter at breast height. And I didn't really understand the difference, and now I do. One is mature trees, and the other is what you buy at the nursery. So I think that sums it up. So I want to again thank Susan for a tremendous amount of work that was incredibly helpful to everyone with regards to this. Okay, does anybody else have any comments about this before we open the public hearing?
I just have one question. I heard about, the holly trees we were just talking about in the front. Do the plans provide with any specificity for the gender or the sex of the trees? I think hollies need to be mixed up in terms of male and female trees. I don't know if you drill down to that kind of detail, but I would think some care would be, put towards addressing the issue of, I think it's called botanical sexism.
I'm happy to address that, but Meredith can also. She's an expert.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. I was just gonna say that level of specificity is not included in this. That is true. If you want hollies to berry, you need like 1 per 10 male, or some measure of female to male. That level of detail isn't in this set right now. That's kind of a construction level that I think we would get into, but yeah, that's all I was going to say about it. I don't know, Susan, if you want to add.
In regards to hollies, they're pretty prevalent. And if there is a male Ilex opaca somewhere in the neighborhood, these will bear berries.
But there would be no reason not to make sure that you've covered that base on this property and not just rely on other ones in the neighborhood.
Well, the only reason to have the male is if you want berries.
Why wouldn't that berries be desirable, especially as food for birds or other foragers?
They would, and we can ask the applicant to change the plant schedule to include the proper number of male ilexes in order to have this row of trees produce berries.
Is there anything else that's on this landscape plan that has to be looked at in terms of gender?
I don't.
Susan muted, I think by accident.
Yeah.
But
I don't think so, no.
Okay. They're also packed very tight. The arborvitae's on either side of the property. And normally you would want to leave a little space between them so that they're not going to be so tightly compacted next to each other initially, and it might take 2 or 3 years for them to sort of fill out and use up the space. But I've seen plantings where they put them so close together and then they're fighting for space and it looks ridiculous, but you get the look you want right away, which is like a hedge. So I can't tell visually if these are really, really tight and they're going to have to remove like every third one in 5 or 6 years because they're fighting for space. Can you just explain how you figure that out?
yeah, I can. So these arborvitae's specifically are pyramidal, so they're very tightly compacted. You buy them at probably they're only going to be 2-ish feet in spread when you first buy them from the nursery. So we actually do have these specified at 3 feet on center so that they have some space to grow into one another, but they're not going to get much wider than 3 feet themselves. They're specific species for that use. So they're not really, I know exactly the condition you're talking about where, every like 5th one dies after a few years because of competition, but these are specifically chosen so that we avoid that.
So they'll be chosen and planted as to not give instant gratification in terms of being a hedge, but will mature into something that's attractive and will survive.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
As long as you protect them from the deer, which love arborvitae.
Yes, we will be doing that too.
Right. Okay, anybody else? We can pull the screenshot down, the screen sharing down. Okay, before we open the public hearing, we waited until we had what we felt was as complete an application as we could because there were so many changes before we invited the public to comment on this. But we do have one open issue with regards to the code requirements for a complete application. We do not have a survey that's been signed or even 2 surveys. Neither one of them has been signed, but we're not going to follow up on the 1963 survey. But I think that the planning board members would agree with me, given the nature of the site at this point in time, a signed survey is probably not necessarily. And the planning board does have the authority to waive the code requirement for a signed survey. So I'd like to, before we open the public hearing, just take a vote. If I can have a motion then to waive the requirement for a signed survey for this application.
So I'll make the motion, but I don't want this to become a habit. I think normally surveyors sign their surveys. So that I think it's unusual if they don't, but, I'm willing to agree to waive it in this circumstance, but I
Right.
think, the building department should be, aware that this is something that's required. It's not onerous, and we shouldn't get applications without signed surveys.
But, this particular situation is unique. You can go to Google Earth and look and see what the site looks like. Yes, we don't have the topo lines or anything like that, but I think that at this point where we are now, waiting for a signed survey is probably not necessarily.
Well, can we get a signed survey? And you're asking?
Absolutely. I'll make certain that that's submitted.
Oh,
Then that's fine. Great.
So we don't need to do that. Okay.
Then I will happily make that motion.
Well, we don't need to, we don't need to second it if a signed survey is gonna come before us. Okay, all right, so we're coming to the point of where we invite the public to speak on this matter. We're gonna open the public hearing, and then if you would like to speak, if you would please raise your hand. You will be acknowledged by Brittany, who will promote you. And we'll just go from there. Brittany, is there anything that you would like to add?
Nope, I'm gonna promote.
Okay, before we do that, let's
Yep.
open the public hearing. We need a motion to open the.
So moved. I was just going to ask you.
I need a second.
Second.
Okay.
Second.
Ellen, okay, so we're voting on opening the public hearing. Ellen,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Richard,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Okay, the public hearing is open. So Brittany, if you can promote the first person who raised their hand or would like to speak. I'm not sure we can tell the order of people raising their hand. We'll just have.
Yeah, I'm gonna go in order of who did.
Oh, okay.
Mm.
Okay. All right, our first, could you please state your name and address, please?
Who's been recognized?
You have Mr. Teekert.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. My connection's really bad here, so I apologize in advance if it drops out. Thank you for taking public comment on this application. First, had a few questions about the board's process on this. When you have a public hearing, will all the records that you've received be part of the public hearing record?
I'm not sure to what you're referring.
Well, I emailed you on March 2nd about the lack of a signed and sealed survey for the property, which I think is a significant issue.
Did you hear our conversation?
I'm sorry?
Did you just hear our conversation about this? The applicant's.
I did, and I wanted to comment on it. The section of education law that requires signed and sealed licensed professionals' work says that no official of the state or of any city, county, town, or village therein charged with the enforcement of laws, ordinances, or regulations shall accept or approve plan specifications, geological drawings, or reports that are not stamped. So I think, the board will do what it's going to do, but I think the main problem is that the village is accepting unsigned and unsealed licensed professional work. And so I guess I'd like to know if my March 2nd, 2022 email will be part of the record.
It didn't come in during the public comment period, but you've just made that comment. So I think that fact that you've made that comment is now part of the record. Is that-
Okay, I would ask that the email be made available. I mean, open meetings law requires that whatever the board gets is available for the public. There were also, at your first meeting, I think it was mentioned that the board had received a number of emails about this application. I haven't seen those uploaded. There was an email sent to the village manager, the board of trustees, the building inspector, the co-chair of the tree committee, and the building inspector, and the PB members about this application, which I also think should probably be available to the public and part of the record. And I do think there are some problems with the stormwater plan, which I'm going to get into. So the question for me is whether the public hearing will be left over and left open until those things are addressed.
I don't know. Let's see how things progress.
Okay.
Are you going to ask another question or can we move on to someone else?
No, I have a bunch more stuff.
Okay, why don't you proceed?
I will. I had a question about the email that went to the Board of Trustees and et cetera. In it, it said, this current application must be based on the conditions of the lot prior to tree cutting. Furthermore, the applicant is subject to the new village tree law and will be required to replace the trees in accordance with the schedule therein. And I'm confused because the back and forth when the trees were cut down said that they were cut down prior to the tree law and it wouldn't have any effect. So I'm just curious why this has been subjected to the new tree law.
Are you complaining about it? I thought you would like it. Teresa,
I do like that, but I'm concerned that, you know, that basically the board follows the laws in existence.
Teresa, would you like to explain the legal determination that you had regarding?
Yeah, specifically, the applicant has worked with the planning board, as I think you heard from Mr. Napier and from the other professionals that the applicant has retained. And they were willing and did propose to replace the trees, which they, when they purchased the lot, were no longer there. So what we used the survey for that you're complaining of was really existing information along with other information that Susan Oakley was able to uncover to demonstrate the trees that were present. And then we made the case to the applicant that based on all available information, there was a substantial amount of tree material that was previously present and providing habitat and aesthetic and other benefits. And they were more than willing to add additional trees to the plan and increase the attractiveness of the overall plan in a way that will benefit them and will also benefit the village. So again, the goal here is to, you know, live within the spirit of the tree protection law. And I think certainly it was not followed slavishly, but Susan did a superb job, as Kathy had mentioned, as the chair had mentioned, with respect to proposing material and making sure that we take a site that's essentially been denuded and make it as attractive as possible again.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is the applicant was very cooperative, but they weren't required to comply with the requirements of the new tree law. Is that correct?
Mr. Teekert, I'm not here to be cross-examined.
Okay.
You're welcome to make whatever comments you would like, and the
Okay,
board
that's fine.
and I will do the best we can to answer them.
Well, if that's what you're going to do, I'm just asking if they were required to, or they just did it out of wanting to cooperate with the board.
I'll
That's
answer
all.
that. I'll answer that. I think everyone knows that the trees were removed against the code requirement that they would need a site plan. So when the trees were removed, they did not follow the procedures in the code. So we determined that because that happened, I think somebody said it nicely, that people don't benefit from breaking the code, breaking the law, and that we would apply, now that we had a site plan application in front of the planning board, we would apply the law as it exists when the site plan was submitted, application was submitted. We never got to the point where we had to require anything. The applicant was more than cooperative.
I will move on. All I'm saying is the email said they would be required.
Okay.
I'd like to discuss the SWIP for a bit. My first question is the planning board reviewing the SWIP for this property, or is the building department doing it as an administrative action? The evaluation sheet submitted by the building department does not indicate who has the responsibility.
Consulting engineer has been working with the planning board with regards to the stormwater management plan. When we have a site plan of this nature involved, the planning board takes responsibility. It's not an administrative action.
Okay. So I just want to make a quick comment before I go to the actual SWIP. There's a sidewalk in front of this property. There's no connection to the sidewalk on either of the adjacent properties. And I'm just thinking it might be more attractive to remove that sidewalk and have a better planting area for the trees that'll be there. On the SWIP, Mr. Finnan, I believe is how it would be pronounced, has certified that the project has been designed in accordance with the terms of the Speedy's general permit for stormwater discharges. I don't think it has. Mr. Sessions.
Mr. Keller.
Last memo.
Mr. Keller.
Informed the applicant that they were going to have to, I'm sorry?
Mr. Keller, you're speaking.
John.
Oh, Keller Sessions. Okay.
John Keller. Yep.
Yeah, Mr. Keller in his last memo said one of his comments was the applicant has lowered the stormwater mitigation system below the basement slab elevation. Please confirm and document that vertical separation of 3 feet exists between the bottom of each infiltration system and groundwater or bedrock. No new plans have been submitted since that comment, so I don't think that requirement has been met. And looking at the 3.2 grading and drainage plan, it's clear that there is not 3 feet of separation. They have not shown that there's 3 feet of separation between the bottom of the practice and either groundwater or ledge rock. The back practice has an existing grade of about 25 feet. The bottom of the practice is 19.5 feet. 3 feet below that is 16.5 feet. So 8.5 a test hole of 8.5 feet would have to be dug to verify.
I think the applicant indicated
the
at the
SWIP
beginning
says-
that they were doing that, didn't they?
Right.
Yeah.
right.
Correct. We're scheduling
Yeah.
the testing as I had previously
this
said
earlier.
earlier on. Yes.
Right. This was addressed earlier this evening.
Has the testing been done?
We're scheduling the testing either this week or next week to confirm the testing. We've already previously done testing. However, since we had to lower the system based upon comments received, we need to do supplemental testing. We're confident that we meet the intent of the stormwater manual's
Okay, but the
requirements and
board's
we'll
not going to
demonstrate.
approve the SWIP without that testing done, are they?
No, of course not. We're
Okay.
not approving it.
So,
tonight.
I
We're
guess-
having a
We're
public
not
hearing.
approving, I mean, let me
No,
get this clear before we
I-
continue. We're not approving anything tonight.
Okay.
Some open issues.
It goes to the question I asked, will the public hearing be left open until the application's completed and the SWIP?
I don't know.
Sorry?
We will decide that when we hear
Okay,
comments tonight. Okay.
okay.
Peter,
Oh,
you
I'm just,
you
okay.
have more? Because we have other people that probably.
I'm sorry?
Do you have more comments or questions?
I do. I'll let you know when I'm done. The front Coltech system will actually need a 13-foot deep test pit, which seems like a challenge, but both of them need new testing, new test pits. The percolation test data in the SWIP does not appear to conform with the requirements of the speedies permit and the stormwater design manual. There's no indication of when the test holes, the deep test holes were dug. Those test holes are supposed to be left open for 24 hours and observed upon digging and after 24 hours. The chart says that percolation testing was done, but the stormwater design manual requires infiltration testing, which is a different procedure. There's no indication that the required 24-hour pre-soak of the test holes was done before testing was carried out. So I think if they're digging new test pits, that should be gone over to Mr. Kellard's March 18th memo says the applicant needs to prepare a draft notice intent and MS4 acceptance form. I don't know if that's been done. He also says the applicant has prepared an NOI and a SWIP acceptance form within the SWIP, but then he goes on to say the documents will need to be signed and filed prior to the start of construction. I would suggest it if the planning board is taking responsibility for the review of this, that there's no reason those couldn't be signed for your review. Page 3 of his memo, item E, says the applicant shall provide an as-built plan of the stormwater management system certified by an engineer of record. I don't know what the planning board can do to make that happen, but as I think some of the members know, I've followed stormwater in the village for years. I don't know of any SWIP application that's filed a as-built plan of the system.
Can I just reply to this? So
Sure.
we've had several projects in the village. There is an as-built that is done. We provide a certification letter certifying that it's been installed in accordance with the plans. That is in order to close out the notice of termination form with the DEC to close out the permit. It is required. So even if the board tells us we have to do it, it's already required by the board. And all the other testing, it has been done in accordance with the manual. So, you know, I mean, I understand your concerns, but it's been thoroughly vetted and done in accordance, and we're working closely with the town, the village's engineer to resolve any issues.
Okay, as I pointed out, the testing clearly hasn't been done in conformance with Appendix D of the Stormwater Design Manual. I don't think that's arguable at this point.
So I respectfully disagree, because I oversaw the testing and we performed it in accordance with the manual. It may be just a matter of terminology. However, it was done in accordance with the manual. We do all our testing in accordance with the Stormwater Management Design Manual.
So you did a
And I can second that. And to your comment with the depth that you
24-hour pre-soak of the
that's
test
why
holes?
we've asked to have the testing done again, so we can make sure there's depth.
Right,
Once
but the
that's
test,
done,
I mean, so you're going to do both deep holes and new infiltration testing because you're going to be infiltrating at a lower level now, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so as we
Okay,
stated before,
great.
we're retesting to make sure we have the proper separation that you brought up.
And the proper, and you have an accurate infiltration rate.
Correct.
Right. Correct?
Correct. Yes.
Thank you. So that's it. I would hope the board would leave the public comment. I'm sorry, the public hearing open until a completed storm SWIP is submitted. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Brittany, can you Mr. Tickert and promote the next speaker, please?
Do.
Brittany, do you have an idea how many people would like to speak?
I only have one other hand up.
Okay, thank you.
Hello? Hello?
Hi, you're there. We can hear you.
Yeah, okay, hi. This is Claire Wolkoff. I am the individual who sent the email in this morning, and I would like to thank Kathy and Susan for the table she put together, because I found that very helpful.
And I just want to clarify that I didn't have to do anything to ask Susan to do it. She just went ahead and did it.
Well, thank you, Susan. That was helpful. But I still do have some questions. So I understand now that the front part is basically going to appear a hedge of hollies. And then kind of to the sides there, or a little further back, will be the shade trees. So the shade trees that are being planted, they're measured by the caliber, following the minimum requirements under the current tree law of 2 to 2.5 inch caliber. So, and I see the growth rates, et cetera, but what will be the height of these trees at planting? That's my first question.
As I mentioned, it's
Right.
difficult to ascertain the height because there are different species of trees.
No, I understand that. Mhm.
So a maple, for example, might be a different height than a tulip tree.
Right. No, I'm not going to ask you.
Even though their
Yeah.
caliper is 2 to 2.5 inches.
Mhm. Okay, I understand that. But are we, if we're walking by the property, and as I said in my email, this is a very popular strip of Orienta for people to walk along. They walk to the seawall. We watched the devastation of this property as all the trees were removed. So people, not just because I'm across the street, are interested in what is going to be going on there. So in the early years, aside from this, relatively short hedge of hollies, what will we be able to see in terms of the shade trees that are growing behind them?
Since the hollies are going in at 6 to 7 feet tall.
Yes, I see them.
I would guess that all of the shade trees that go in will be taller than the hollies. And some much taller than the hollies.
Okay, so you think that even at planting, they will be?
Well, if you look at the list provided in today's memo.
Yes, I have that.
Even the flowering ornamental trees are designated to go in at 8 to 10 feet.
Yes, I saw that. I was wondering about the shade trees, which
A
are
two-
caliber, yeah.
A 2 to 2.5 inch caliper shade tree is a pretty big tree. But I can't guess. So you'll basically have 3 tiers, the hollies, the ornamentals, and then the shade trees.
Well, that's what, obviously we're looking for, that there should be variety, not just, one thing. And there's a lot of animals, birds. I know we've done a lot of planting recently. One of our criteria was to be bird friendly.
All these trees, they were required to plant and only plant native species, just for that reason, to create habitat, wild nesting areas for wildlife, as.
Right. I think that's one thing that was important to us. And I personally have service berry trees in my yard and provide incredible food.
Right, we have them also.
Right. So what you see there are trees that are going to be bird friendly and going to attract birds. And especially if other people in the neighborhood have trees that attract birds, and this may even be a better mix of trees than what was there before, which were largely maple trees. And so we have this mix and nice mix of flowering trees here too. I have to give credit to the applicant's landscape architect. She did.
Okay, now I know that all the specifications comply with the current tree law. There's no doubt about that. I was wondering if it would be possible to have some of the trees, not all of them but some of them be a little larger, because there was such variety before. And this is starting at, we planted trees recently, and this is, pretty much the level we were planting at. But I'm wondering if it would be possible, given the devastation that was done to the trees there, to put some of these at a larger size to start with.
Well, I don't think we can commit to that, but thank you for your comment. We'll take it under consideration.
Okay, I think that's it for my comments at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one other person.
Okay. You have to take Ms. Walkoff off.
Hi, my name is Andrea Grant, and 1016 Orienta, the neighbor. First, I want to thank you for all of the work that you guys have done on this, and to the applicant, it's come a long way. The question I have a couple of questions. One, is the driveway that I don't understand it. Is the driveway a permeable driveway?
It's a gravel driveway, so no, it's not permeable.
So that adds more water flow.
It's going to be, which will be collected and treated by the stormwater system.
Okay, so that's all calculated into that. And was there a reason you used the 100-year flood versus the 500?
We're not required to treat the 500-year flood. We have gone above and beyond what is expected of us, and we've worked with John Kellard and Kellard Sessions on this, and we are infiltrating the 100-year storm event, which is not required by the state code at all.
Okay.
Yes, the 25 years that's required, but we asked for the 100-year, and everything's contained on site. It's all infiltrated through the units.
Okay, well, yes, and we know Mother Nature is changing, so planning ahead is an important thing. I was speaking to Steve Simkin tonight, who couldn't appear from the Oriana Point Association. And I think as Claire was saying, and many folks, is that the scale of this property, to take in consideration the scale of this property and the caliper of the trees. And so everything is not the same 2 inches. I think there's a big request to actually up that. You can get 4-inch caliper, 6-inch caliper. You know, there are other size trees that create, instead of a uniform look of a nursery, that there's something that's created that takes the place of the ecosystem that actually was there in this entire area, and so that it grows back as such in a different way. That so to please consider that as an important piece. And the third point, especially the Steve and the Orienta Point Association and all the 650 members actually wanted to make, is that without the trees, the lighting is a big issue, and to see what the changes are on the lighting that have been met, especially since you can't plant trees right on the front of Orienta. What is the proposed lighting now? You know, has that changed based on the face front?
So you're talking about the lighting in the front,
Yeah, on the front of, you know, and all around the house, because obviously there's less foliage to block any lighting that will now be seen, you know, quite bright.
I'm not sure we've actually gotten into, we talked about lighting around the pool because that's part of the review of a swimming pool. I'm not sure we've even talked it, or maybe somebody from the applicant can.
Yeah, this is Meredith from Langen. I think it's possible we address this in a comment. There's currently not lighting proposed, and that's not part of what would be reviewed by this board, but that any lighting that is proposed will be strictly limited to wall sconces and decorative light fixtures at the front door, you know, for the safety of the residents who are coming in and opening up their door. I think they have no intention of putting up, you know, huge floodlights or anything major like that. It's going to be in keeping with the design of the house and the neighborhood that the house is in. So it would be, you know, certainly no plans for huge floodlights or any kind of things like that I know people worry about.
Well, I mean, that's interesting because I've seen a trend towards lighting being placed in tall trees to light the property for, I guess, more outdoor use in the yard or whatever. I mean, I think it might be worth considering if the board were so amenable to think about prohibiting lighting in the trees as they grow. Obviously lighting around the house and, you know, low lights at the front walkway or around the driveway. I mean, that's not the problem. I think the neighbors are concerned about lighting up in a tree that's going to, you know, light a larger area and be distracting, not just for wildlife, but for neighbors.
Diane Eaton from Keller Architects. There is no current plan for that. And I would agree with Meredith's assertion that it's just going to be lighting that's typical of a residential house.
Okay, just one other process question, because I know a lot of people couldn't come and speak tonight. I would suggest also to keep the public comment open until decisions are made, if that's possible. I thought that was a good idea. I just know people were out of town and not able to participate, and it's important.
Yes. Yes. Well, you all may know this, but you know, the planning board isn't required to hold a public hearing on an application like this. It's at our discretion. And because we know it is important to the neighbors and to the neighborhood, you know, we decided from the get-go that we were going to hold a public hearing. We just waited until we had a more complete application so that we didn't get a lot of the comments like we got at the beginning, which were based on the first submission by the applicant, which, as you all have noted, has changed substantially. So I think tonight's comments were certainly much more productive and relevant to the process and where we are now. So, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Brittany, is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Anybody else is raising their hand?
Okay. Could you then, I hate to use the word demote, but
Thanks.
Ms. Grant and Ms. Wolkoff from the.
Yeah, they can, for some reason, it won't allow me to. If you can unpromote yourself or.
Oh, it won't allow you to demote them?
No, I tried 3 times, so I just.
Oh, okay. All right. See, that's strange. Okay. Okay, then I ask people who are still participating in the meeting from the public, if you would, thank you for muting yourself. Okay. All right, so that brings us to the end of where we are tonight. I think a lot of the issues that were raised, especially with regards to this, were issues that have already been addressed or being addressed.
Well, one thing that came up tonight that I found a little bit intriguing is that, I mean, we've talked about the size of the site and the number of trees that have to be replaced, and certainly appreciating that the applicant is working so closely with us and our consultants on this. But the varying the caliper of the trees is an interesting thought. But I'm wondering that if that were to happen, the applicant would end up putting in less trees, because if I'm looking at this right, a larger caliper tree would maybe have a larger root ball. And so you, rather than put in 3 2.5 foot, 2.5 diameter trees, you put in 1 4.5 diameter tree. So you'd have less trees overall, but you would vary. They wouldn't be so uniform in terms of the caliper. And I don't know if there's an advantage to that variety, but rather than just, putting in a bunch of trees all the same caliper, so you get more, but does that really achieve what, the village and the planning board and the neighbors are looking for? I don't know. I mean, maybe Susan can help me understand how that works.
Susan, let me add to that. I don't think, obviously when the tree law was written, it envisioned being written for a situation such as this, where you're putting in all the trees at once. But would this different species, yes, you have the same caliber, but would the different species, and some are going to be taller than others, and would that be enough to sort of give the variety, the look, and not to make it look like, a nursery, you're looking at trees on a nursery, especially if they take all the tags off the trees so they don't look like they're still for sale. I don't know, Susan or Meredith,
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in here. I think hopefully to help maybe clarify some of this a little bit, but for one thing, I will also just say, to start with, that our drawings hold the owners to use nursery standards. So there are nursery standards for the correlation between the species, the caliper size, and the height. So to Susan's point earlier, every caliper size per species is slightly different. And there is a lot of variety of species in the different shade trees, but that'll be held to that standard. And so every shade tree in that list is going to be slightly different in that 2 to 2.5 inch range. For, if I use red maple as an example, the nursery standard for red maple at 2 to 2.5 inches, I think somewhere in the range of 12 to 14 feet in height. So not every single one of those red maple trees that are going to go in are going to be, exactly 12 feet or exactly 14 feet. There's going to be a variety in the species and also within like each individual type of tree. And then beyond that, there's also that Susan was mentioning, the kind of different levels of trees here, right? So we're installing 2 to 2.5 inch, which is going to have quite a bit of variety in the shade trees. And then in addition to that, we're also installing the ornamental trees, which I think we have a range of 8 to 10 feet. So that's some additional variety there. And then below that'll be the evergreen trees, which are in that 6 to 10 foot range. So between all of them, there's actually going to be quite a bit more variety, but the shade trees specifically at that 2 to 2.5 inch, there's actually even more variety than 2 to 2.5 inch implies. Does that help clarify things a little bit in that?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure. I mean, I have to sort of think about this a little bit more.
It's a lot to wrap your head around, I know, but.
Love trees, don't know much about them. So
I have one more thing. I have one more thing to add regarding putting in a larger caliper tree as opposed to a smaller caliper tree, that it's much more difficult to have a larger tree establish itself than it is a smaller tree.
So you're saying the rate of success for them to stay alive and thrive, you're better off when you start younger.
Yes.
Smaller.
When you transplant, and that's basically what a bald and burlap tree is. You're transplanting it from one location to another.
Okay, that helps too. Thank you.
Somebody gave us some feedback there. Okay. I think the other thing that came up today, if there is an orphan sidewalk in front of this property, we have some in my neighborhood too. They crack me up. They just don't connect to anything. However, we can't. I don't think the planning board can ask somebody to remove a sidewalk because it's on village property.
It would be a nightmare to remove that sidewalk. It's like the only protection you have when you're walking. There aren't a lot of sidewalks. You need at least a few stretches where you can.
We have the same thing in my neighborhood, and one of my dogs insists on walking on a sidewalk whenever she sees one, which is often, but she has to walk on it. So, okay, all right, I get it for impervious surfaces and whatnot, and that little greenery, but there has to also be pedestrian safety, and we cannot. That is village property, and there is actually a procedure for removing sidewalks, which is similar to the procedure for repairing sidewalks. So, okay, let's just put that to that. Okay, so here's where we are now. Teresa and Ashley and planning board members, do you want to adjourn the public hearing to another date, or close the public hearing? What's your druthers here?
What some boards do is they'll close it with a 10-day written comment period.
I think the point that Mr. Teekert was making is he'd like to see all the I's dotted and T's crossed, and all the results of the new test pits and everything, and making sure that to his understanding and satisfaction, everything is according to plan and according to law. Our licensed engineers are assuring us that they are, and that they're following all the guidelines and whatnot. But there's another option then also, that we could continue with written comments. We wouldn't be able to, if the applicant is doing test pits either this week or next, we wouldn't be able to get you on the agenda for the next meeting. Would have to be the meeting after that at the earliest, correct, Brittany? Yes, right.
Yes, if the public hearing is kept open, do they have to renotice again for the next meeting?
I don't think so.
If
Well,
it's continued to a date certain, you just need to update the sign. They don't need to send the mailing again.
right.
Yeah, the next meeting, the cutoff, I mean, that would be pretty tight. So
Right, no, so it would be the second meeting in May, so it would be the one right before Memorial Day weekend, yeah.
The 25th.
The 25th, yeah. So we could do that, we could adjourn it to the 25th, assuming everything would be in by then. We could close it and have a written comment period open, or we could just close it. So let's hear, what do people think we should do?
Sounds good.
Which one? I'm sorry.
It sounds okay.
Sounds good.
That sounds
The
good. Which one?
25th, the 25th.
Adjourn it to the next meeting. Adjourn it to the 25th. And, okay, all right, okay, so I need a motion then to adjourn the public hearing to a date certain, which would be May 25th.
So moved.
Second,
Okay, Richard,
Yes.
Ellen,
Yes.
Cindy,
yes.
and I vote yes. Okay, so we'll leave the public hearing open and we'll see what happens. We come back from the SWIP, and I think we've addressed some of the comments with regards to the plantings and the, but we'll go over the comments, and if anybody has anything else, we'll settle in on the 25th if we can. Okay,
Thank you all very much for your time and attention.
thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm not sure who that is, but I need a motion. That brings us to the end of our agenda, so I need to adjourn our meeting for tonight. It's
So moved.
8:41. Do I have a
So
second?
moved.
All in favor, we'll do a voice vote.
Aye.
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 All right, thank you, everybody. Good meeting. We got a lot done. Very good. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.